Hi, and thanks for joining me today. So in this video, I am going to do a tutorial on how to use these two die sets from Tonic Studios. They actually came in a couple of the recent $25 Mystery Bag Wednesdie deals. And in I think one week I got the Toby Sill, and then the following week I got Harvey's Ledge, which I was super excited for because I used to have a cat and I currently have two dogs. So these were just so fun, and I was really excited to have both of them to play with because you can actually mix and match the window panes, and that gives you a lot of different options, a lot of versatility, and so super fun. The card that I'll be making is this one right here. And so I did die cut components from both sets just to have a lot of different options to play with. And so you'll see elements from both die sets in my card making, but ultimately this is the combination that I ended up with. And all of my leftover die cuts and pieces I just put right back into the packaging so that next time I go to use these dies, I'll already have some components that I can pick and choose from. I did want to also mention that the plane and the banner in the sky, those die cuts did not come from these sets. They actually came from two different Sizzix Stampin' Die sets. If you've seen any of my mini album tutorials, you'll know I'm a big fan of these Linda Canase photo frame Stampin' Die sets. Super cute. They're like the perfect size for those Instax mini photos, and what's really nice about them is that they have little captions or sentiments that you can die cut right into the photo frame. So super cute. This one, there's the product number on it, and it's more their birthday kind of celebration themed photo frame set, and the banner, the slightly curved double fishtail banner, comes from here, as well as the happy birthday sentiment. So that one I got out of this set, and then the airplane I got from a similar set. This one is travel themed, and so they have in this set a die that cuts out that little airplane. There's also a stamp, airplane stamp that comes in this set too, so you could have stamped it and then colored in the airplane as well, but I just went the easy route and I just die cut the airplane. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and show you how I made this card. So I'm super excited to have both, and I'm excited to start playing with them. They both work essentially the same way, so I'll just describe the Harvey's Ledge and what comes in it. So you get in total 7 dies. The first die, just working outside inwards, this is an outline die, and this will just cut out your panel for your window. And the next die end is this is a verso die, so it cuts into your card, but it doesn't release anything other than these decorative designs. So this is the decorative layer of your window frame, and without the outline die and without the inner aperture die, this die by itself, the verso die, it won't actually cut out your window frame. So then that brings us to the next die in the set, which is your inner aperture. So this will actually cut out this inner portion. And between the two sets, while it's the same size, they did create some differences so that you don't have an exact duplicate, which is also something that's really awesome. That way you don't have two of the exact same dies. So on Harvey's Ledge, in that set, this inner aperture die the piece that falls out of this will have a dotted edge border. On Toby's Sill, the similar die that cuts the inner aperture, that's just going to be a plain border. So plain straight edge all around. So these three dies will basically kind of make up your window frame. Then both die sets have 4 different window panes, and these are 3 of them are actually verso dies, meaning they cut the design into the paper. Some parts are going to fall out, but the design will be left attached to your card. The 4th die is a little bit special. It's this one right here with the flower vase. And both Harvey's Ledge and the Toby's Sill has a die that is going to be structured in the same way. This is one die, but what it actually does is it has 2 separate and complete cutting edges. So the first cutting edge will actually cut around the entire quadrant, the entire window pane. The second cutting edge is completely separate, not connected to it at all, and that cuts out your vase with the flowers. And so when you use this die, what's going to happen is you'll have a vase die cut that drops out like this, and then you'll have a square that drops out of this die as well. So this die basically you would use if you don't want anything in that window pane. Like you don't want any of the bunting, you don't want any of the pets or flowers or anything. And so you would use this, and then as a bonus you would get, this element that drops out of it, which you can use somewhere else if you wanted. So I like that they've given us a decorative element, but also as well the option to have like an empty window frame, window pane. And on Toby's Sill, the die that does that is this one right here, the one with the little kitty cat that kind of looks like it's floating, in the middle of the frame. So you can see that the cutting edge for the cat does not intersect the cutting edge for the windowsill. So you're going to get 2 kind of shapes that cut out of that. So you'll get this square, and from within that you'll get this cat that's cut out from that. So it's really nice to have both sets, because then between these 8 window pane tiles, you can really just mix and match and build up your window scene however you like. There are so many different options, and it can be super efficient, because then it's possible that you could even do one pass and get, all 4 window panes cut out. So really nice. It just really depends on what you want to have your scene look like. So I have already prepared a lot and done a lot of, if not all of the die cutting, just so that it's a little bit faster to put this card together. But I'll go through, and I'm sure that there are a lot of different ways of using these die sets, and so I'll show you what I did, and it may not be the prescribed way or the most efficient way, but it's a way of using the die set, and if it works for you, feel free to do the same. And if I learn something new, then I'll share that as well. The way I approached it was, I decided first of all whether my scene was going to be, I decided my card size. So I'm going to be working with an USA2 size card, so 4.25 by 4.25 by 5.5. I am creating a top fold card. It just happens to be I had a card blank that was already folded and ready to go. The next decision was, am I creating a scene that is from the inside of a house looking out or from the outside of the house looking in. So, especially with the puppy dogs, because you do kind of have two different options of dogs. So this is the silhouette of a dog from the back, and this is two dogs more from the front because you can see their faces. So if your dog is, the idea is the scene is that your dog is staring outside the window, then you might choose one over the other just depending on whatever point of view you're designing this card for. So I decided for this particular card, I'm going to be on the inside looking out. So I went ahead and just cut down some pattern paper, and I am going all the way to the edge, and I'm not going to leave. Most of the time I like to leave that little white border, but I have a feeling that it might kind of take away from the realistic effect of the scene. So I'm going edge to edge with my decorative border here, or decorative layer here. And it's just some, tone on tone, very subtle pattern paper. The idea being that this is going to be my wall, kind of my wallpaper. So that is going to be where my scene starts. Then I did die cut both window frames just so that I can see how they look and what I liked. And so a couple of different options for how you might want to go about creating your window frame. So the way I did it was I took the outline die, then I took the Verso decorative die, and then I took the inner aperture die. And then I lined all three of them up so that they aren't touching, they're equidistant from each other, they look like they're, positioned in a good location and whatnot. And then it really does help if you have a magnetic mat to be doing all of this on your magnetic mat, because once you get one die down, then you can, it's a little easier to maybe nudge the other two dies into place. But however you choose to do it, what you definitely want to make sure of is if you are going to run this through in one pass, that you want to put some low tack tape over all three dies and touching your paper. And that way you can, and I would do it in 3, 4, or 5 spots just to really make sure that none of the dies will kind of jump or move while you're rolling it through your die cutting machine, because if the dies overlap, you could ruin the cutting edge and affect the dies. So and a lot of times I'll just go, especially if you're doing a lot of these, if you happen to be doing cards in bulk or in mass, if you just run the tape all the way across all three, then it kind of keeps that relative position together, and then you can just kind of remove all three dies at the same time as if it was one die. And then each time you use it, you would use a little bit more tape than I have here, but so each time you want to cut out another window frame, you can just take them all out together as one and then die cut another window frame. So for this combination of dies, you get Harvey's ledge, and that looks like this. So you can see the outer die is going to cut this out on the outside and release it from your cardstock. The inner edge cuts all of these decorative pieces out. And then the inner aperture die cuts out this inside panel right here. So that panel will drop out. So that used to be in there. And once you cut all three, then that drops out. So Harvey's ledge window frame looks like this, and then I did the same exact thing with the 3 dies that were in Toby's Sill. And that gets you this look. Not sure which one I'm going to go with, but I am leaning towards this one because I'm from the point of view of the inside of the house looking out, and what I like about this one is that it has this upper window arch here as well as the large window here. So I kind of like that. Then you can see more of the outside scene that I'll be building. So then that gives us this. But if you look, if this goes direct, over your card, there are elements that, are going to see through all the way to the back of the card. And so we want to start adding our scene in those places. And some of these places are actually part of the window frame itself. So then we'll need to add another layer behind this. So a couple of options for how to achieve that. The first one that I did was to, once I had this set of dies where I cut out my complete window frame, what I did was leaving it kind of all 3 stuck together. I pulled off the tape and then I moved it so that just the inner aperture and just the outer frame were adhered to a second piece of cardstock. And then I removed the verso die between them, which is the decorative layer. And by doing that, we know that the positioning is all the same and it's going to match up with this earlier piece that we had cut out. But because these openings behind here is actually not the outside world, but behind, these edges are part of the window frame itself. So when you die cut this, I would choose a cardstock that kind of resembles whatever material you want your window frame to be built from. So I chose a tannish color just to kind of mimic wood. And I thought about maybe stamping a wood grain onto this, or running the piece of cardstock through a wood grain embossing folder, giving it some of that more wood grain texture and look. So that's definitely an option too if you really want to kind of enhance the realism of all of this. But I chose not to do that this time. So you can see once you cut just these two, just the outline die and the inner aperture, you'll get this piece, which then you can just layer right behind your window frame. And then now we've got a solid window frame that we can put on top of our card. So the only thing that you can now see through is actually the window area where your window panes will be. So that's one option. The other option that I did for Toby's Sill was I just took just the outline die by itself, and I cut that out of some white cardstock. So then you get this piece. And once you have this, what I did was I put my window frame with all, of the decorative elements cut into it, with the inner aperture cut out of it, and I put that on top of my solid piece. And then I just gave myself some pencil lines. So I just traced around this inner area. I traced around, I gave myself a line for where this upper area is. And essentially you want to just give yourself some reference lines so that you can actually color in and ink this panel directly to build up the scene of what should be seen through this decorative window frame die cut. So let me show you what that looks like. So here's a panel that I did some masking right around my pencil lines, and then just inked up a little sky on in this portion where the center aperture would be, and then up here where this is what I'm considering just window, but you could make like a stained glass effect look, or do, you know, whatever, however you want to dress it up. So in my case, this is just going to be clear window, so you can just see through to the sky. And then behind the window frame area, I just inked it with some light tan, just so that it has a little bit of color and it isn't just white. So it kind of looks like there's maybe some wood there, and then some white detailed wood carving maybe is what the window frame's made from. So however you want to color it in whatever mediums you want to use, that would be another way of kind of building up your scene. In this option, where we did die cut the aperture out from the backing piece of our window frame, what I did in this case to get my window scene was the piece of white cardstock that comes out of this topmost layer. You can just ink that up and then inlay or drop that right back in, because it'll be a perfect fit, since that's where it came from originally. So so there you have two ways to get your scene to this point, where you've got your window frame that's solid, it's backed by something, and you have your in my case, outdoor scene that is set up and ready to go. So then the next thing we need to do is actually create the four kind of quadrants and each of the window panes. I think I kind of like this one better, so I'm gonna go ahead and just start to put these pieces together. And so all I'm gonna do is just run thin line of liquid adhesive, and you can use whatever works best for you. Lately, I've been really using the kind of a dotty adhesive tape runner. I use the Tombow one, and that's really nice because it just really puts adhesive where there's actually cardstock, and so that's kind of nice. For really small stuff, I sometimes use one of those Xyron sticker makers, and that's really convenient too. But liquid adhesive is often probably the most economical, but also a lot of times it can be a little bit faster. So I'm gonna, and what's nice is you get that extra kind of time to nudge everything in place. So, all right. So now we have our piece here. Then to create the actual window panes, the four window panes, a lot of different options here. And what's really, really super nice about having both die sets is that they are interchangeable. So they did design these dies so that the four decorative window panes are actually the exact same size, and you can swap them back and forth. So what I did was the easiest thing is if you do have both sets, if you can find four dies that make up your entire window, that's going to be the quickest and easiest. That's probably going to be a little bit harder to do if you only have the one set, or if you want, like, you know, the bunting to be across both across two different window panes. So if there is a window pane that you want repeated, you'll definitely have to run it through your die cutting machine twice. But one thing to note, and both die sets have something similar, is that 3 of the 4 window pane dies is actually they are verso dies. So they will cut this design into your card, leaving a positive image in the card. But one of the 4 is actually a little bit special, a little bit different. And in Harvey's Sill, it's the one that has the flower vase. Harvey's Ledge. In Toby's Sill, it's the one that has the cat that is just in the center of the window pane. And so here are these 2, just so that you can see what makes these different than the other 3 that come in their respective sets is that it is one die, but it actually has 2 complete and separate cutting edges. So what happens is that this die will actually cut an empty window pane, as well as a die cut image of, in this case, the flower vase, and in this case, the cat. So, for example, if you run this window pane through, this is what's going to drop out from that. And if you run the flower vase through, you'll get this. So you can see that this dropped out completely from all 4 edges of the window pane were cut out. So what's going to be left is an empty window pane, but you can actually, punch this through and you'll have the vase and flowers, and then you can kind of punch that through and you'll have a cat. So that's how you would get an empty window frame or window pane if you didn't want anything in that window, in that quadrant. So what's really nice about having both sets is that you can use them both if let's say the top 2 window panes, you don't want any curtains or any bunting or anything going on up there. You could use both of these to create empty window panes at the top. And so I'll just kind of show you how I did this. So if you wanted to set your scene, and if you were able to find, let's say, 4 dies that made up your scene, then you would just have to run this through the one time, and you would get your whole window pane already set. So I'm using the inner aperture die, and then you just, similar to how we die cut the window frame earlier, just position each of the 4 within your aperture die and get them equidistant from each other, line them all up, and then be generous with some low tack tape just to make sure that what I do is anywhere there's dies that are next to each other, I put tape. So I would put tape, here, because it's sort of an intersection point between these 3. I would put one in the center because that's sort of an intersection point between these 4. Better to have too much than too little, because what you don't want to have happen is for the die to jump or move as it's being rolled through, and then overlap on top of each other and dent or ruin the cutting edge. So be generous with your low tack tape. If you have a situation where maybe there aren't 4 dies that you can conveniently assemble and run this through the one time, then I would kind of set this up so that you can get as many done in one go as possible. So let's say we wanted these curtains, but we want them on both of the upper panels. So I would run it through once this way, and then whatever comes out of that, I would run it through a second time with just this die. So what I did as an example was I die cut. I used one of the blank ones. In the case of Harvey's Ledge, it's the one that has the flower vase. I used this one for the curtains, and then I used this one to get the puppy's silhouette. And then I used one of my inner aperture dies. So that's how I created this one. Once you run that through the one time, this area here is still going to be solid. So then I moved this over here, lined it up with everything else, and then I removed this die, and the aperture die, and I only ran it through with the one die the second time. And then that gets me that look. So that's one way of setting up your scene. The other way that I did it was I actually just created myself a 4 empty panes. And I did that similar to how I did the one that has all of the decoration already in. So I used my aperture die, and here's where it's really helpful that I do happen to have both sets, because then I just lined up the 2 dies that will cut out an empty frame, one from Toby's Sill, one from Harvey's ledge, and I ran it through the first time, like that, and then taking this out, I ran it through a second time to cut out the bottom window panes, and then that gets me this empty windowsill that I can now decorate, however I want. So there are a couple of different options for how to create your window panes, and I'm not sure which I'm ultimately going to go with, but I do have a lot of it prepared. So let me show you kind of where I was headed with these. So let's say we go with this one. So you can see this drops right into that center, and it would look like this. But that doesn't look super realistic because it's all in white. And so what I did was, using the same window pane, I just die cut it out of some another piece of pattern paper, so that I can just put this right over top of the white base. But that still doesn't look quite right to me, because that just looks lacy and there's portions that see through to the outside. So I put this die cut over just another piece of paper, and I traced around the edge and fussy cut that, and I used just another piece of pattern paper. That way I can put this over top, and then I have a solid curtain now. So I've got some lacy design, and then another piece of pattern paper that is going to be my backing piece for my curtain. And so now when I put that over here, I feel like, to me anyways, it looks a little bit more realistic. And I did already prep a second one from this side. So, all you would do is just glue with your favorite glue, just putting just little dots of glue all around. Oops. And then I'm going to put my backing piece over it. Okay. So that gives us a nice decorative window covering, and then the dog still looks a little bit strange the way he is. So I just die cut using the window frame or window pane die that has the little puppy, and then I just cut right along the bottom, and I'll overlay that on top. So that's kind of one option. And that was initially where I was headed, but then I thought, where am I going to put my sentiment? Because I feel like it would be weird to put, a banner or something, because then you kind of break the scene and it doesn't look realistic anymore. And so I thought about what I have in my stash and what I could use. And what I came up with is I happen to have a I think it's a Sizzix die set, and it has this little plain, and then it's got this little banner. And the idea being that the plane is going to be flying across the sky with this happy birthday banner. So that's going to be how I'm going to get a sentiment. And it's a little bit of a tight fit, so I might have to do something kind of like that, and you're going to have to sort of fill in the blank a little bit. I think it'll be obvious even if part of the sentiment is obstructed. It's kind of tough though, because it depends on how much and what you want seen and what is okay to be covered, and will be kind of obvious. People will get the gist, you know? So maybe something like that. And then once I have this kind of positioned where I want, I'll glue it down, and then I'll just draw a little line from the tail of the airplane to the sentiment banner that it's dragging through the sky. And I did swap out to my plain window pane or windowsill here, so that I have more sky to work with, and can build up this plane flying through. But I still want my, puppy in the window, so I'm just gonna take the little brown puppy, and I can put him on either side, really. So I think that's gonna be my scene. And one of the nice things is that if you remember that die that I showed you that cuts out these empty window frames, I did have to use it multiple times. So now I've got multiples, of these little cats. So when the die does its job, you'll get this where it's cut out the full window pane and the cat from there. And so now I've got these cool cat die cuts, and you can always color these in and also set them into your scene if you want. So always an option to have these extra little elements and kind of hang on to them in case you want to use them. Similarly, the vase with the flowers would work the same. So it's just die cut out of white, but you could easily color that however you like, and then pop out the vase and put that into your scene. So that's an option too for another way to kind of fill your window and decorate the window. So I think that is I think this is going to be my scene, although I'm second guessing my choice of wallpaper here. So I might swap that out, but in general, hopefully this gives you a good idea for how to work with these die sets, and a couple different options just depending on what technique you feel most comfortable with, whether it's die cutting everything at the same time, or doing it in multiple passes. You can achieve the same look, just using different methodology. But I really think that these scenes are so fun, and it'll be really interesting to just kind of see like all the different ways that they can be decorated, because in my mind I'm already thinking this could be used for a night scene, maybe a Christmas scene where you're looking from the outside in and you can see maybe a whole living room with a Christmas tree or a fireplace. So I think these are going to be a lot of fun to work with. And then especially if you are from the outside looking in, if you have things like brick embossing folder, or things that have that sort of structural texture, those might be really fun too. But it is nice that these dies do fit on an A2 size card, because that's the card size that I most often create from. So it's a tight fit, but it does fit. And you might have to be a little bit creative in terms of how you fit a sentiment into your scene, but I feel lucky that I have these little elements with the plane and the little banner, and I think it's just a really cute way to add a sentiment, and it's still kind of realistic, still part of the scene, and it doesn't break that fourth wall. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this, and at the beginning of this video, you hopefully will have seen the final card as my introduction to this tutorial. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider liking and sharing it. And if you have any other questions or requests, feel free to leave me a comment. Thank you, and have a fantastic day. Bye!